Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cape May Arts Today. I'm Roy Steinberg. I'm the producing artistic director of Cape May Stage. And today we are so fortunate to have the executive director of MAC, Jody Alessandrine. Jody, welcome.
Thanks, Roy. It's great to be here.
You know, I read somewhere that it's easy to be the captain of a ship when the sea is calm, but real leadership is required when you have choppy seas. So you chose to become the leader of one of the, probably the most important arts organization in Cape May, at a time when the seas were choppy is an understatement. What's it like coming in just as COVID-19 was happening?
Well, I really don't have any other real frame of reference other than living with what about 3 weeks into my tenure. But actually, I was hired last June and didn't start full-time until February. I'd been working on a per diem basis while I was still working at the Nature Conservancy throughout the fall and the early part of the year to kind of shadow Michael and see what was going on. But yeah, absolutely. It's been one of those not what I expected in some respects. I've been really blessed with having a very professional, experienced staff, and we've had to adapt like everybody else and be able to turn on a dime and deal with the situation and try to make lemonade out of lemons. And there's no silver linings whatsoever in a pandemic where now over 200,000 people have perished, but in this country and worldwide, God knows how many. But it definitely has given us perspective that we might not have had as soon as we do now, considering the pandemic.
Yes, well, you certainly are blessed with a wonderful staff, and we are blessed to have you leading it. A question for you. MAC was the Mid-Atlantic Center for the Arts, but it has changed, and now it is Museum plus Arts plus Culture.
Right.
Can you talk to us a little bit about why the change and what that means?
Sure. Technically our EIN, our nonprofit name, remains Mid-Atlantic Center, then morphed into the Mid-Atlantic Center for the Arts and Humanities. But in about early 2018, MAC really did a self-inspection evaluation process, and they hired Princeton Strategic Communications to do surveys, including those of members. And they wanted to find out just whether or not members and people in the area really understood what MAC was doing for the community with programming, et cetera. And if not, why not? As well as trying to figure out whether or not we were actually reaching all the potential audiences that we could reach. And it eventually came to the fact where they realized that, and this is obviously before I became part of MAC full time, that we needed to rebrand. So after a lengthy process, the idea came up, and it was very, I don't know if it was genius or very lucky, but our acronym Cape May MAC, and that's our website's capemaymac.org, didn't even need to change throughout the process. What they discovered is that we really needed to center on our core being Cape May and mentioning Cape May in our name, and all that MAC has done in its 50-year history. And it was also decided that in our 50th anniversary year, 2020, would be the best time to roll this out. Well, this is obviously before COVID and the challenges that presented to roll out a new brand. So Cape May was really important to include in the name because of all that MAC has done for Cape May in its 50-year history. It started with the organization was formed to save the Emlyn Physic estate, and the Physic Museum became the Physic Museum House. Cape May, or MAC, was very, very instrumental in helping the city to get Cape May on the historic register as the only National Historic Landmark city in the entire nation. So we have that history that we really wanted to celebrate and build off of. And then all other parts of the history, saving the lighthouse and restoring that. We've invested over $2.3 million in the lighthouse, historic World War II tower, all the tours, the trolleys that we operate, and the walking and house tours, et cetera, et cetera. So it was really to celebrate that, but also to try to launch into the next 50 years with some new ideas and some fresh approaches. And then keeping the word museum or adding the word museum into the name was really important too, because not only is the Physic House a museum, not only is the lighthouse and the World War II tower museums, but our entire property, we have 9 outbuildings, is essentially a museum here at the Physic Estate. And for all intents and purposes, in that we're the only National Historic Landmark city in the entire nation, Cape May is a museum without walls. So that's how we arrived at the name. I think it's very appropriate and timely.
Yes. And in fact, as it turns out, Cape May Stage is housed in a church that was built in 1853. And so there we kind of combine, it's not a museum per se, but the building is certainly of historic significance and architectural significance. And so the arts, you have partnered not only with Cape May Stage, but I know also with the Jazz Festival. And in the past, you have had relationships with other arts groups as well. Can you talk to us a little bit about the arts part of MAC?
Sure. We've always, in the past, we were producers. We actually started, for instance, the Cape May Music Festival that you see in my background. When we first started that 31 years ago, we even had the Cape May Music Festival Orchestra that we put together. What we found is that partnering with other arts entities, nonprofits, some for-profits, is probably our best way to be able to present the art. So we became more of a presenter. So partnering with you, partnering with Eastland, partnering with Bay Atlantic Symphony and New York Chamber Ensemble et al. That are part of the Cape May Music Festival, to be able to provide arts programming in Cape May is what we really figured, stick to our core competencies, what we did best. And that's how we found that we have been able to tap into both history and the various art forms to be able to make those essential parts of our programming.
The future of museums in general, worldwide, has been in jeopardy. I mean, there are certain museums, I know the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, for example, just recently opened and was only allowing 25% of their normal occupants in that particular building. How do you envision how do you envision the future of museums nationally and in general, and more specifically here in Cape May?
My experience with museums is admittedly limited to what I've as being a passionate lover of the arts, and this experience is obviously kind of fast tracked my understanding of what we have to some of the challenges of operating a museum. I think it goes back to whatever core competencies you can lean on. I know that here we have an incredible, like I mentioned, a great staff, not only full-time staff, but great part-time staff of interpreters that have been able to look at situations and suggest changes in programming. So our biggest programming with the museum are people just don't go in and just look at the house, but they go in with tours of the house, and there's a history component. There's everything in the house has some, from whether it be the furniture to encrustas, et cetera, has some type of historic significance. So it's all in how you interpret it and then how you market what you're presenting. So from our standpoint in Cape May, we've been able to really provide some diverse programming with our museum, leaning on history, leaning on what's in the museum, but also bringing in some interesting tidbit type things like haunted, not haunted house, but haunted haunts tours and things of that nature that really talking about Victorian oddities and things like that have spiced up some of the programming. So I think that, it's sticking to core competencies, but also being able to turn on a dime and be able to provide some type of new and interesting programming, while again, not straying away from whatever you do best. The best is the best advice that I can give. And heretofore, that's what really has been able to save us in the past 6 months, because every one of our tours, although we're down to only 25% occupancy of the museum, only 12 people on a tour at one time, we're sold out completely. Just about every tour is sold out. So we're fortunate with that. And I think that's because there's less to do in town, but also because we have such variety. We see people coming back in the same week for a different tour in the house. It's quite amazing.
Well, I'm so glad you mentioned Halloween, because Halloween is soon upon us. And, I know that every year outside of the Physics Estate, there's been the Scarecrow Alley.
More people, I think, a lot of families who are homeschooling and doing a lot more at home are tapping into those folks. I predict that we're going to have more scarecrows on property than ever before. And to that end, we're also reaching out to school districts and people who are homeschooling, and including a lot of our programming. Here at the Physics Museum, the World War II Tower Museum, as part of the curriculum, which, because people are dying for curriculum, our museum education department is doing everything digitally, remotely, and they are really swamped with requests. So kind of converted a little bit from the initial question, but it is providing opportunities.
I can't resist commenting on the use of the word dying on Halloween.
Yeah.
Victorians were very interested in spirituality.
They were.
In death. And, for those people who are watching us who don't know, Cape May is a Victorian town. Most of the architecture was built in Victorian times. And the Physics Estate, of course, is a Victorian piece of architecture with Victorian furniture in it. In fact, recently, Cape May Stage and the Physics Estate collaborated on a project. Speaking of Victorian, we actually did a piece about Queen Victoria. We used the Physics Estate as a location. It was a wonderful opportunity for both of our organizations to, first of all, for us to work in a museum. We're so thankful, that, and we were very cognizant of the fact that it is a museum, and we were not to touch anything or move anything without permissions of the curators, and they were wonderful to work with. And I must say, I'm so thankful to you. Whenever I'm working with other arts leaders and they pitch in and move things from place to place, I have a special place in my heart. And you did that. As we were approaching midnight, you were still moving stuff around.
Well, being an old, being a former musician and stagehand, I know all about that. It's all hands on deck in those situations. And that was an excellent opportunity. It was great for us to be able to show a little piece of what we do and possibly avail the museum and the Cape May Mac and everything that we do to potentially a whole new audience.
Yeah. Well, Cape May Stage historically has a relationship with Mac. And I was wondering if you had any ideas about how we might build on that relationship.
Well, I think, and I don't know if I'm letting the cat out of the bag a little bit, but we did discuss possibility of having some programming, Cape May Stage programming on site here on our outdoor stage at the Emlyn Physic Estate. We've done that with the Spy Boy Productions recently, providing some jazz. We're actually doing a 4-day thing, October 1st through the 4th with the Exit Zero Jazz Festival. So kind of neat opportunities to use our property. And again, bring some people in that might not know what we do and what we're able to offer, a myriad of different type of arts and cultural programming. So anything that we can do with you in the future, we're all ears, and any opportunity we'll definitely consider. What it also has helped is our restaurant. As you know, we've recently partnered with the Cara Group to offer vintage BYOB downstairs. That's another thing too, Roy, of understanding your core competencies. It took us a little bit longer to realize, but being in the restaurant business was not one of our core competencies. And the restaurant downstairs now has done exponentially better in that it's in the hands of professional restaurateurs as opposed to people who are trying to just dabble in it. But that restaurant has really done well, and I think has complemented. There's been kind of like a symbiosis with some of the programming that we've been able to have, especially in the evenings on the property. So
yes, I had the opportunity to eat there, and it's just wonderful. Really great addition to the community. The interesting thing for some of the people who are watching this is that Queen Victoria video that I mentioned. It's called Victoria's Secrets. And I learned a great deal having read this script. I mean, I always think of Victorian and Victoriana as kind of prudish. People had everything up to here, and the fact is, Queen Victoria was just the opposite. Turns out that she had a very she was involved. She really loved Prince Albert, and the sexuality in that relationship is discussed in some specificity in this video that we're doing, and not in an inappropriate way.
Sure. Well, they did have 9 children, I believe. So they kept pretty busy, and he died pretty young. So
right.
Yeah.
So we had a local woman named Candace O'Donnell who wrote this play and is a kind of scholar. So she wrote the play and then performed the role of Queen Victoria. In the past, Candace has done all sorts of work for Cape May Stage. And this year, we had originally before the COVID-19, we had originally planned for her to perform inside our theater. And when that was no longer possible, someone on my board, I think, said, well, maybe we should do it outside. And we thought, well, maybe outside the Physic Estate. And then we got into all kinds of logistics about people being socially distanced and people just psychologically being ready to get together at that time. And we thought, well, you know what, maybe we should do it inside. And that's how that whole thing started. And I'm so grateful it did, because it led to a really interesting experiment. I have a television background, as you may know. And one of the people with whom I've worked, who was a director of photography, came up with this idea of mounting 3 cameras with 1 operator. So we got 3 different angles all at once. And I wasn't sure if it would work, to be frank, but it did.
It worked really well. It really worked well. And your idea of, selling it with the paywall is something that actually you kind of did a bit of the experiment on our behalf as well, because we're going to be doing some similar things with some of our tours. Unfortunately, this year, it's a real challenge to do our candlelight tour, which is our staple holiday tour, just because we can't expect and don't expect, and there really isn't the willingness to avail people's homes, whether they be B&Bs or inns or whatever. So we are going, even private homes. So we're looking at doing a digital presentation of the candlelight tour and making that available for purchase with a paywall, a Vimeo or something along those lines that I know you use. And so we do thank you for going through that exercise on our behalf in advance for us to make it seem like a real viable option for us. And the good thing about that too, Roy, is it has shelf life. People can buy that Victoria's Secrets video and play 5, 10, 15 years from now. It's not something that is one and done and then you have to turn over. It could be something that could reap some dividends down the line.
Yes, yes. And I know, you've often had these wonderful festivals over the years.
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about the festivals.
Sure. Every year we have 4 festivals on site here at the Emlyn Physic Estate. Unfortunately, COVID has rendered that impossible this year. And that really, we would have maybe as many as 5,000 to 7,000 people throughout the day, not at one time, on property. The biggest one of the 4 is the Craft Beer and Crab Festival, which is normally the first week of August. Next year will be the second week, because it just so happens that the National Lighthouse Weekend falls on the first, and that's the first weekend. That's going to be a challenge. So we pushed it back a week. But yeah, the revenue that we lost by not having those 4 on-site festivals is pretty dramatic. I mentioned the Candlelight Tour. The Candlelight Tour itself, the 3 nights, whether it be through the group tour marketing initiative, as well as people just buying tickets online or showing up or whatever, and most buy in advance because they do get sold out. It's 1,800 people per night times 3 nights. That we could realize upwards of $175,000 to $200,000 profit from something like that. That's poof gone, So the festivals, you consider 5,000 people on property and us getting a piece of all the action, it's a lot of revenue lost.
That goes back to your whole initial idea about being a presenter rather than a producer, which is a very interesting idea.
Yeah.
That
when you really consider it, we do well at marketing, selling tickets, promoting. Let the people who are really good at producing produce, and the benefit is that it really limits our exposure and risk, and allows us to really flourish on what we excel at.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Tell me about any plans that you have for the future at MAC.
Well, as I mentioned before, Roy, I think my plan coming in was to look at the organization and take my time, not keep my powder dry, so to speak,
right,
and not making any rash decisions. I'm following someone who has had 37 years of tenure here, and Dr. Michael Zuckerman, who MAC would not be what it is if it wasn't for him. That said, I know that the board did want to go in some new directions, but didn't want to really push the edge of the envelope, and wanted to give me time to get a thorough understanding of the organization. COVID, I think in many respects for most people, has taken that process and really fast-tracked it. I think we all have to come to some realizations that we probably would have had to or been forced to come before, somewhere down the line. For me, I was looking at 18 to 24 months to be able to make some really critical decisions. I'm having to make that definitely within the first year. Surely within the first 6 months, I had to make some tough recommendations. Again, like I said, there's no silver linings in this whole thing, but it's made us realize that a lot of our staff can work from home. They're professionals. Because keep in mind, what we do, and a lot of what we do, isn't just 9 to 5. So, there's the opportunity to maybe scale down some space, reduce PCs, invest in more laptops, reduce phone bills, and a lot of different things where I think that we can have some cost-cutting measures by being a little bit more efficient. And again, I think we would have come to those realizations of how we would make those efficiencies someday, but we're realizing them a lot sooner.
Yes. I think the one thing, not that it is a silver lining, but one gift of the COVID-19 is the opportunity to take time and reflect. Absolutely. And so I think we've all of us who have had positions of leadership have evaluate, as you say, people have learned when it is appropriate to work from home. And you have such wonderful people. Certainly, Dr. Michael Zuckerman was an extraordinary presence at MAC, and there really would be no MAC without his extraordinary leadership. We are all so thankful that you're in this place, and we at Cape May Stage in particular are very excited to continue that relationship between our organizations and work with you in the future.
And please know, I can speak on behalf of our staff and our tremendously supportive board, that everyone is in favor of really trying to work as much as we can with our other nonprofit friends. We're in that core group together that because of COVID, we've kind of reinvigorated that core group of all the nonprofits in the area. Our board is very supportive of us doing that. And on a personal level, I really look forward to working with you and your staff even more so in the future. It's been really rewarding and educating, and it's educated me in a lot of different ways that, again, walking into something new, I didn't know I was going to be educated so quickly on. So I really do appreciate it.
Yes. Well, again, I thank you one more time. And the other thing that's so extraordinary about just the logistics is that because the Physic Estate not only has the museum, the building itself, you have a number of outdoor spaces that are useful in all sorts of, for all sorts of opportunities. The marvelous festivals that you mentioned in the past, in addition to having beer and crab, sometimes you can have some art.
Right, absolutely. And we want to tap into that as much as possible.
Great. Well, I'm so thankful that you could spare some time. And,
thank you for the opportunity. It really means much.
Okay, bye now. And thank you all for joining us.